There we go. Yeah. Share my screen. Does that look good? Craig, I see you're unmuted. Does that screen look good? Okay. I think Edwin shook his head. All right, well, I'll continue to admit folks, but I think we'll get started since everyone's always has busy schedules. So we're really excited today to continue the Southern Wings webinar series, and we are very thankful to Dr. Eduardo Palacio for being willing to speak to us today about some amazing work that's happening off Baja in Mexico relating to shorebird and wetland bird conservation. So I'm going to kick things off just with a little bit of an overview of Southern Wings. I work for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and the state fish and wildlife agencies in the U.S. created Southern Wings back in 2009. And I, since that time, have had the privilege of coordinating this great program and working with a lot of amazing conservationists throughout the hemisphere. And one of the things we've been doing in the last, I guess it's been about a year now, is doing a webinar series, trying to highlight some of our partners that we help contribute to and that do all the great work on the ground to help conserve our shared bird species. So that's really basically what Southern Wings is, a partnership with state fish and wildlife agencies, and at its core, really a mechanism to do international collaboration for throughout the annual life cycle of the birds that we all share and care so much about. We have had 41 states contributing over $3.9 million across the hemisphere. These contributions have supported the conservation of 81 priority species across 11 countries. Oh, there it is. I was saying it, and it's on the next slide. Through 24 projects. So you can see a general, some of those yellow pinpoints in the map over there are areas in which Southern Wings has been able to support great work on the ground, along with many other partners. So the Southern Wings, what we tried to be for the state fish and wildlife agencies is really a complement to their conservation investment in the U.S. and connecting that up with conservation investments in Mexico, Central South America, and the Caribbean. We offer what we would consider a pretty easy, transparent, and flexible process to get those resources to our partner and work on conservation. From a state perspective, we have states have used a variety of funding sources, whether that's state wildlife grants, Pittman-Robertson funds, taxes, license fees. And we also have a number of mechanisms to move that money and to get that money to the partners on the ground, whether that's through a regional association of states, the Flyway Council, Pacific Flyway Council in this instant, or a US-based NGO like a Bird Conservancy of the Rockies or American Bird Conservancy and others. We also leverage that state money, and we can provide non-federal match for state wildlife grants and Pittman-Robertson when needed, and hopefully for Recovering America's Wildlife Act that is still moving through many processes in the U.S. Congress. Like Eduardo, we have amazing partners on the ground doing incredible conservation work and really making strategic contributions to the conservation of our priority birds, our shared priority birds. And I pretty much now have to just show a Cornell map in all of my presentations because I enjoy them so much. And so, you start to just really appreciate the linkages between all of us across the hemisphere with these birds when you see these maps, and remember that we're going to need to conserve them throughout all these places if we're going to be successful. So I'm going to leave it at that with just a little introduction to Southern Wings and what it is. And now I need to stop sharing, even though my screen went away. There we go. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Edwin Juarez. He works for Arizona Game and Fish Department and is also the Arizona Bird Conservation Initiative Coordinator. So Edwin, it's all you.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks for that overview on Southern Wings. Welcome everyone to this webinar today. This is a Southern Wings project that the Pacific Flyway has been supporting for several years now. And it's one of the, every year is one of the top priority projects selected by the Pacific Flyway to receive funding support. It's part of the Flyway's participation in Southern Wings. And we have been collaborating with Eduardo Palacios and other partners in Mexico, in Northwest Mexico, on this project. And he's going to be giving us an overview on the project. And just a little bit of background on Eduardo. He's a research biologist with the Center for Scientific Research and Higher Education of Ensenada in La Paz, Baja California Sur. He has spent over 25 years studying and protecting marine and coastal birds and collaborating with academic institutions and NGOs across the US and Mexico. And he has also worked with the Manomet Center for Conservation Science as the Shorebird Recovery Project Coordinator for Northwest Mexico. And just last week, the Pacific Flyway met in Colorado, and we were fortunate to have Eduardo Palacios and also Fernando Gavito of Terra Peninsular engage the Flyway and have more involved conversations regarding this project and potentially future projects addressing conservation of shared migratory species. So with that, I'll pass it on to Eduardo Palacios. Welcome.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Deb, for this invitation, and thanks to the Southern Wind Program. Let me share my screen with you. Hi, everyone. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, it looks great, Eduardo. And
Okay.
I will say to the participants that feel free to enter any questions into the chat. I'll be monitoring that, but we will have Q&A time after Eduardo presents too.
Okay. Okay, so I work for CICESE. CICESE is a research and teaching institution that depends from the federal government. We teach at the graduate level, master's and PhD. And I am also board member of an NGO called Terra Peninsular, devoted to the conservation of ecosystems and protection in Baja California Peninsula. So at CICESE, we do research and have students, and the actual on-the-ground conservation work is made by Terra Peninsular. So, but I am with CICESE mostly. This picture is in Bahia Magdalena. It's a few black brands in a mangrove wetland in Bahia Magdalena. So several species has been rapidly declining in the last 50 years. This paper published in Science in 2017 showed that shorebirds have declined about 30% in the last period of 50 years, and as well as other species, like a group of species like aerial insectivores, grassland birds are the most that have been declining, even though some waterfowl species has been increasing and other exotic species also. But shorebirds definitely have been declining very rapidly in the last few years. And as you can see in the map inserted in this graph, all the data that was used and why this paper was possible to do was because data was available from well-established monitoring protocol like the Christmas bird count and the breeding bird survey, international shorebird survey, etc. But all those nice monitoring protocol stop at the border with Latin America or the border to Mexico. So today I'm gonna present some work that we have been doing on monitoring and conservation south of the border for some species of waterfowl and shorebirds. Migratory birds along the Pacific Flyway use several sites along the continent, and that's why international cooperation is so important. And one example of this conservation strategy for migratory species is the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. As you can see in this map, there are about 104 sites along the continent in 15 countries. And in Mexico, we have several important sites, especially in Northwest Mexico. So we monitor and do conservation in these areas. These are the sites, wetland sites that we have been monitoring in the peninsula of Baja California. In the left map is 8 sites, and in the mainland Mexico, that includes the state of Sonora, Sinaloa, and Nayarit, we have 12 wetland sites where we conduct monitoring. So I am in charge of coordinating several partners in each of these sites. There are local observers that conduct the observations. I'm gonna tell you a little bit later what do we do in each site, but basically within each wetland site there are nested sampling units where we conduct the monitoring. So today I like to share with you the Pacific Brand Monitoring and Conservation Project that we have been conducting for the last 12 years. The Migratory Shorebird Project is a very large project that goes from Chile all the way to Canada, and it's led by the Point Blue Conservation Science, but we are participating in Northwest Mexico. And finally, I'm gonna give you an example of application of monitoring data by telling you about a case study, a thesis that was done by one of my students at CICESE. So starting with the Pacific Flyway brand or black brand, this is the smallest geese that we have in North America. It is threatened in Mexico, even though it's hunted. It's a hunting species, so it is legally protected outside of those sites that there is no hunting in there. And this geese depends exclusively on seagrass, Zostera marina, so which is grass that is very sensitive to sea surface temperature, especially warming of sea surface temperature. The black brand nest in the Arctic and subarctic, and after their breeding, they go to a staging area in Eisenbeck Lagoon. They stay there for about a month before heading to northwest Mexico to the traditional wintering areas in Baja California, and mostly in Baja California, and a few also in mainland Mexico, in the state of Sonora and Sinaloa. We can say about waterfowl that brands is the predominant waterfowl in the Baja California Peninsula. Very few ducks. On the contrary, in mainland Mexico, there are more ducks than brands. On their way in the spring migration, on the way north to their breeding grounds, the brands don't go straight. They go a stepping stone by stopping at each wetland, getting fat and getting energy in order to get in good condition for their breeding grounds in the Arctic and subarctic. This is a picture in Bahía San Quintín. In Bahía San Quintín, the brand and their habitat are protected by Terra Peninsular and by the UMA, Los Volcanes. UMA is like an association that outfitters about the hunting of the species. And this species, the brand was traditionally monitored by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through aerial survey since the 1950s. Until they stopped in 2010 because of safety issues in Mexico. And then in 2012, we took over the project and started the monitoring since then of the brand doing ground surveys. In 2013, we had the opportunity to conduct concurrent surveys, aerial surveys by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and ground surveys by us. And we compared the results, and was less than 3% the difference in the counts. So we convinced the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that ground surveys could be the way to do the monitoring in Mexico, with this network of observers in 13 traditional sites of wintering of the brand in Mexico. During the last 12, 13 years, the population trend of the brand has been slightly declining at a rate of 7% annually. These are the fluctuation of the population in the 4 sites that are the most important traditional sites in Baja California: the Laguna Ojo de Liebre Complex Lagoon, Bahía San Quintín, Laguna San Ignacio, and Bahía Magdalena. The trend line that I plotted here is just an example of the slight decline of this species in Northwest Mexico. We suspect that are 2 factors that what they are declining. Well, 3, but 2 local and 1 about that they are staying in Alaska. But the 2 local or regional changes that we have seen is the warming of the ocean. The sea surface temperature has been increasing, especially during the last period of the last 10 years. There has been several events of warming in the sea surface temperature in Baja California, and also the lagoons has been a lot of sedimentation in the wetlands, and that's affect the seagrass. Both the sea surface temperature and the sedimentation affect the seagrass, which is the food for this species. But also, one reason why the brand is declining in Baja California and Northwest Mexico is because the brands are staying in Alaska. In Eisenbeck, there are also midwinter monitoring, midwinter aerial surveys, and since the 2000, the population in Eisenbeck has been increasing exponentially, and the rate of increase has been pretty similar to what is the decline in Baja California, which is 8% versus 7% in Baja California. So instead of talking about a decline of the population, it's a truly distributional shift of the population of brands along the Pacific Flyway. I was saying that Terra Peninsular has been conducting habitat protection in addition to monitoring the population of brands, and we have been always wanting to get a federal decree as a natural protected area of Bahía San Quintín as a biosphere reserve. We have not been able to succeed to this decree, but in the meantime, we have been implementing several legal tools of protection of the habitat in Bahía San Quintín, including federal concession of the federal zone, conservation agreement with the federal government. But the most important tool that we have been using is the creation of reserves, the creation of natural protected areas through the private reserve. Terra acquired several hundred of hectares of land in Bahía San Quintín and converted into private reserve, which basically works like natural protected areas. It's in the federal government. Actually, they are in the system of natural protected areas, included in the system. They have park rangers, and in each of these natural reserves, they conduct restoration of habitat, surveillance, and in co-management with the government and in co-management with the association of hunters. They conduct surveillance and protection of the brand in the area. There are other tools or mechanism of protecting the habitat. This is a summary of the number of hectares. But what I want to show you in this table is the three kinds of protecting habitat in San Quintín that Terra has been conducting. Basically, the creation of natural protected areas, I said, through private reserves, and also state protected natural areas. The other type of category of protection is co-management with federal government of some areas, and as through conservation agreements and concession of the federal zone, and also conservation, special conservation areas such as the designation of critical habitat, and also designation of wizard sites, Ramsar site, etc. So now I am gonna switch to the Migratory Shorebird project. The Migratory Shorebird project is a collaborative, partner-driven research and monitoring program that is led by Point Blue Conservation Science. The basic is focused, of course, on shorebirds, especially migratory shorebirds. We conduct monitoring of these species during midwinter from November through February. And the objectives of the migratory shorebird projects are to identify shorebird population status and trend. We just published a paper on a journal that is attending this topic for 3 species. Is the case study that I want to show you after this. Another objective is to assess threat potential impacting population. For instance, human disturbance, recreational human disturbance is an underestimated threat to the shorebird population in the Pacific Flyway. We just published a paper also on this topic, and show that about 30% of the abundance is impacted by human disturbance in one site. Also apply data to inform conservation actions and build capacity for long-lasting conservation of shorebirds. So this is the scope, the geographic scope of the project, the Migratory Shorebird project, from Chile all the way to Canada. 13 countries are participating with more than 80 wetland sites. And as I said, within each wetland site, there are nested sampling units. In average, we count 1.3 million birds per year of 39 species, conducted mostly by volunteers. About 500 volunteers and biologists doing surveys. Several graduate students have been mining through this data and getting their thesis done. And also this migratory shorebird project has been coordinating with other multinational programs like the Central American Waterbird Census, the International Waterbird Surveys, etc. International Shorebird Surveys and others. These are the 6 most popular species that we count in the project. This is the willet, the black-bellied plover, the Wilson plover, the marble gadwit, the downlin, and the snowy plover. We count that amount of their biographic population is recorded. Also, we count about 12% of the population of 12 species more. So this is an example of the migratory shorebird project. The sampling units are nested in each wetland site. These yellow polygons that you see in this map is where I live, by the way, in La Paz, in Baja California Sur. Each of these yellow polygons is a sampling unit. There are 12 in this case. And in each these sampling units, this is the red line encompassing the sampling unit. We count, of course, shorebirds, but also we measure human disturbance rate with the presence of aerial predator, raptors, basically, and the condition of the habitat, and also the weather correlates. Mudflats is the focal habitat to monitor shorebirds and other waterbirds. We count not only shorebirds, but also other waterbirds like this Forster's tern, American white pelican, etc. Dogs, waterfowl, egrets. Another important habitat that we included is sandy beaches. This was possible because of the support of southern wings, by the way. And this habitat is very important for snowy plover, sanderling, and redknots. Saltworks is another habitat that is very important, especially for roosting shorebirds during high tide in the natural wetlands. This is very important, for instance, in the saltworks of Laguna Ojo de Liebre in the middle of the peninsula of Baja California. And all this is conducted by volunteers. We use different means in order to reach the sampling units, including boats, because some sampling units are on the shoreline of islands within the wetlands. But we also use cars, walking, ATVs, etc. And all the data of the migratory shorebird project collected from Chile to Canada are stored in the same database. This database is hosted by Point Blue Conservation Science. It's called the CADC, California Avian Data Center. And this database has applications, maps, or tables and graphs that anyone can quest and obtain reports of the information stored in this, compiled in this database. The data has been used for wizard designation. This is an example of Bahia Todos Santos that was designated in 2017. And the 2 species that were important in this site was the snowy plover and the redknot. In Mexico, the snowy plover is threatened and the redknot is endangered. But there has been other designation of wizard site that has been, or Ramsar site that has been important to have this monitoring data. Also, we have been able to list species like the snowy plover and the black oyster catcher as a threatened in the Mexican law, and also the American oyster catcher and the redknot as a threat, as an endangered species in the list of endangered species in Mexico. So now I'm gonna give you an example of the application of monitoring data. This is a paper that we just published in the journal Global Ecology and Conservation. This was done by one of my students, Estefania Muñoz Sala, and this is about 3 large shorebird species that have in common that breed in the temperate area, in winter mostly in California and Northwest Mexico. The marble godwit, the willet, and long-billed curlew. We were interested to see the population trend and also the association of their abundance with weather correlates. For that, we use the abundance information in the Migratory Shorebird Project collected during the last 10 years. For that, we use the surveys of 36 coastal wetlands. Out of those, 19 wizard sites and 33 Ramsar sites. And we use the number of surveys that we use was 4,845 surveys collected in 629 sampling units in the period of 2011-2019. The environmental variables that we used to associate abundance to this weather correlate was precipitation and maximum temperature and minimum temperature, and also sea surface temperature. The environmental variables were collected for each site from the Climatic Research Unit time series, and the sea surface temperature was obtained through the Environmental Research Division Data Access Program by NOAA. We found that the marble godwit it has been declining in the last 10 years at a rate of 7% annually. We also found that their abundance is negatively associated to winter precipitation. We suspect that this is because precipitation causes sedimentation of wetland and affect the prey of these species, and also the weather affect positively. The winter minimum temperature was positively associated to the abundance, which means that the warmer the winter, the more abundant is this species in the study area. There was also a significant declining trend for the willet. Actually, the decline was larger than the marble godwit. But in the long-billed curlew, the population seems to be stable. We didn't find any significant trend, neither increasing, neither declining. So it seems that it's stable in the area. However, long-billed curlew uses agricultural habitat, and in those habitats, we do not have sampling units. So this still needs more studies, especially with data from the agricultural ground. One interesting side is that all the decline of the marble godwit and willet was in California and also in the Baja California Peninsula, but we didn't find any significant trend in the mainland Mexico. Sonora, Sinaloa, they were stable. The association of abundance of willet was also similar to marble godwit. It was positively associated to minimum temperature. That means that the warmer the winter, the more abundant is this species in the study area. Whereas sea surface temperature was negatively associated. So that means that willet don't like warmer sea surface temperature, and also precipitation was negatively associated to their abundance. And as I said, maybe it's because sedimentation provoked by winter precipitation affect the prey of the willet as well as the marble godwit. This is the paper that we just published, where you can find more details about this work. And finally, the long-billed curlew, the only weather correlate that was associated was to precipitation, and in contrast with the marble gadwit and willet, long-billed curlew get benefit by more precipitation. So the more precipitation, more abundant is this species during winter in the study area. So our results, in conclusion, suggested that marble gadwit and willet experienced population decreases in the study area between 2011 and 2019. This is concerning, especially in the peninsula of Baja California, because there is one site, the Ojo de Liebre Guerrero Negro Lagoon Complex. More than 50% of their biographic population wintered there, and they are declining. They have been declining at a rate of 20% in the last 10 years in that single site. We don't know why, because there is no human disturbance, and apparently it's well protected. It's a biosphere reserve, but there could be other natural causes associated to this decline. And also the willet is concerning because it has been declining not only in Northwest Mexico, but also in California, Oregon, and Washington, and that was shown by other monitoring protocols, such as the Christmas bird count. There is over the internet, you can see the trend viewer, and that shows also population declines of up to 4.27% annually. We are planning to write a listing petition for this species in Mexico because it's declining very rapidly. And finally, I want to acknowledge the support of the International Program of Forest Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Pacific Flyway Council, and of course, Southern Wing. Thank you very much for the partial support to this ground, and all our partners for conducting the work of monitoring Point Blue Conservation Science, CONAM, Terra Peninsular, Sonora Joint Venture, and so many institutions and volunteers from Northwest Mexico. And thank you, and I am open to questions.
Thank you, Eduardo. That was excellent. Really, such great work. When you were talking about the Brant, it really brought home how important it is to be thinking across the full life cycle of these species. When you mentioned that the Brant was declining in Baja, but some of them, the same percent almost, was staying in Alaska. And so you realize, if we're going to conserve these species and get a sense across of how to do that, you really need to understand what's happening across their life cycle. And that led me to think of, I wonder if they're having any impacts in Alaska on habitat or anything, if Brant numbers are increasing. Anyway, it's really, really excellent.
Yeah, and the only way to show this or to realize about this is to have monitoring in all the Pacific Flyway, no? Because there is partners along the Pacific Flyway doing the midwinter surveys also.
Yes. There was, and anyone is welcome to raise their hand and ask a question. And there's also a couple of questions in the chat about, and one of them you partially answered as Anna was asking it. But she was wondering about how many times the data that you've collected has been used to argue for a new protected area. Is that something you fairly commonly do with this data?
We wish to do more application of this data, or to use more of this data. Actually, one time we went to Mexico City and interviewed with several agencies in Semarnat, which is the environment agency in Mexico, in order to talk to different directors of the different agencies, in order to tell them what we were doing and what we could do more that they need in order to be incorporated in our monitoring program. Because what we need is or what we want is to our monitoring data to be used for conservation. It has been used by Terra Peninsular in San Quintin, for instance, in order to get that quiet land, in order to restore. For instance, right now they are doing a restoration project by retrieving the Bahía San Quintin is mostly used for aquaculture of oysters, but because of different reasons, some structures where they conduct the aquaculture are abandoned, and they are not being used anymore, but they are occupying a space for seagrass or for the birds. So right now we have been, Terra Peninsular is very active in retrieving these taking off that structures in order to provide more habitat.
Okay, very good. Hey, Anna, I see your hands up. Do you want to elaborate on your question?
Yeah, no, thank you, Deb. And thank you, Eduardo, for that answer, and also for the presentation. It was really fascinating, wonderful work. And I just want to say that I would love to chat more if you're willing to put your contact information in the chat. Just to introduce myself, I recently started working with the Wildlife Conservation Society, Mesoamerica and Western Caribbean. And we're trying to sort of develop similar work on the Pacific coast of Guatemala. There was a project in 2020 between WCS Guatemala, WCS Arctic Beringia, and Fundaeco in Guatemala, as well as a Coastal Solutions Fellow from Cornell. And they were trying to fill the monitoring gap that you can see pretty well on the Migratory Shorebird Project map. There's not much for the Pacific coast of Guatemala, and so they were trying to sort of fill that monitoring gap. But now we'd like to continue that work in relation to creating new coastal and marine protected areas on the Pacific coast of Guatemala. So I'd love to chat with you more about, sort of how you've used the monitoring data to argue with the Mexican government for creation of new protected areas.
Definitely, we have a lot of in common things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Anna. That's great. It looks like Eduardo did put his email in the chat, and it'd be interesting for you and I to chat too. I know WCS is a partner in some of the same projects in Honduras and Nicaragua that we are, and we work with Fundaeco also through Southern Wings, but on the conservation coast, so on the Caribbean side. So yeah, it'd be interesting to chat a little more about kind of what your vision is and what you guys are thinking.
That would be great. Yeah, I'll send you an email. I think I have your email. Okay,
perfect. Edwin, you unmuted. Did you want to share something?
I just want to add really quickly that Eduardo and I have talked about, similar to what Anna was suggesting, that there's a really good amount of data that's been collected in Central America. And I think thinking about what a Southern Wings project in Central America on the coast of Guatemala and El Salvador or other countries might look like, I think would be a really good step towards increasing our coverage of Southern Wings conservation in some of those areas. And we have, I think there's additional opportunities. I think also, as Eduardo was presenting that analysis, those three species, those case studies, I recall that at our Flyway meeting, he had mentioned that there's obviously a whole bunch of additional analysis on other species that could be done that's already there. It's just a matter of having availability of funding to have graduate students, look at those data so that we can continue to use that data and think strategically about what areas or what sites would benefit those species that may be showing up declining overall based on this data that's been collected over the years.
Yeah, that would be a great conversation to have. I mean, Edwin and other state folks on the phone, we love to see how that data can tie into on the ground action. And so seeing how we might be able to support getting that data analyzed would be a great conversation. We've got a few more questions in the chat. There was a clarification, Eduardo, that did you say that you are preparing a listing petition for willets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, based on this finding, that I mean, we didn't expect to find that the rapidly decline of this species, and also according to the Christmas bird count is also declining in United States. So something is going on with this species.
Yeah. Another question. Hola, Rosabel. Rosabel was asking a similar question to what I was talking about before with Brants, and she's asking if you know if these species are declining, the species that are declining at your sites, do you know if they're moving elsewhere similar to the Brants? Because she mentions in Panama in the last 4 or 5 years, they are counting more willets and godwits than before.
That's very interesting. Actually, that's why in our analysis, we subdivide our study area in California, Peninsula, and mainland Mexico, because first of all, we found that they were declining in the Peninsula of Baja California, in the bachelor thesis of this student. And for the master, she hypothesized that they were not declining, but moving to mainland Mexico or staying in California, and not truly declining, but also distributional shifting. But we did find that that is not the case. They are declining everywhere, at least in the region.
Right.
Except in the they are not declining in mainland Mexico, but not increasing either. So they are declining. I mean, at the net is declining. Oh, even though, of course, we would very nice to extend the study area, no, to farther south, like Rosabel is mentioning. Yeah, the willet have a very wide distribution, even and also even to the other coast, and the Atlantic coast, and then in the Central America and so on. So it would be very nice to do a very wide range-wide analysis of the trend for this species. But so far, that's what we saw, and we thought about that they were moving to somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, I think it really highlights the complexity of the work we all do.
Exacto.
I mean, how do you know what's happening all over, and if they're, more willets and godwits in Panama, where are they coming from? Are there more? That's so complicated.
So that's why we have more and more work.
We do.
Once we finish a paper, there are more questions than answers.
Yes, in the US, we might call that job security.
Yeah, sounds right.
A couple more questions. Stephanie was wondering if you would be able to share links to the papers that you mentioned in the case studies. Are they available online? You could send them to me at some point and I could share them with
participants. Yes, they are available online, and I will share it with you.
Okay. All right. Well, Stephanie, we'll
be my pleasure.
Okay. Yes, and I see Susan and Anna are connecting in the chat around U.S. Forest Service international programs that also work in Guatemala. So it's fun to have, Southern Wings, WCS, U.S. Forest Service, Canadian Wildlife Service, lots of different partners on the call that, also better understand where we're all working or where we're all supporting work, and how does that connect up, and are there gaps? Are there places we all should be supporting conservation, like figuring out about, what Anna mentioned about more monitoring along the coasts of Guatemala, El Salvador and Panama, and yeah, really good conversations. Any other questions? You can either raise your hand or put them in the chat or comments.
I found the link to the paper, so I put it in the chat.
Perfect, thank you.
I hope it works.
Yeah, I'll check it out and then I'll share that as a follow-up.
Mhm.
Yes, got it. And it looks like Rosabel has been using Shorebird data to propose new wizard sites in Panama.
Mhm. That's right. Actually, I'm reviewing one of the proposals.
Aha, yes, we are. Yes.
Thanks, Rosabel. Saludos.
I was curious, and this I know wasn't specifically in your presentation, but I remember in the proposal that Southern Wings has, you had talked about an iterative learning analytical framework. And I was curious what exactly that was and how you were using that. Is that something you can share with us? Or I know it wasn't in your presentation.
No, it is not. It was not in my presentation, but the sampling framework means that because you call that cross-sectional studies.
Mm.
So because we only do one survey, one midwinter survey, but we have so many sampling units. It's like a snapshot of the distribution and abundance of shorebirds in the study area. So
Okay.
that's a cross-sectional study. Instead of longitudinal, that would be, for instance, going December, January, February, March, etc. So have a time series of observations of the abundance. In this case, we have like we generate like gradients of so we have the counts and, for instance, different gradients of human disturbance, low, medium, and high human disturbance, and we can do the association with just one single survey, but in one point at a time, but different spaces, different sampling units.
Okay.
I don't know if I can explain it myself.
Definitely.
Thank
you.
Iterative, it means that we adapt the data and the surveys. For instance, before we didn't have much sampling units in sandy beaches. It was mostly mudflats, habitats, and saltworks. And we expanded to sandy beaches because we saw that we were missing sanderling, for instance. No, it's the most logical shorebird that we would be missing if we don't sample sandy beaches.
Excellent, thank you. Edwin, you have anything else you want to share before we wrap up here?
I was just going to ask a follow-up question to Eduardo. Some of those sites in Northwest Mexico, do you know how many of those have MODIS stations, or there are plans to have MODIS stations? I know that Pronatura Noroeste has been working with several partners all along the coast. And I was curious to see if I would assume some of those sites have MODIS stations, or there will be MODIS stations coming online, thinking about other opportunities for collaborations.
Yes, Pronatura has been the leader on this setting of MODIS station, and during the last 4 years or less than that has been a bloom of MODIS station. I think there are 15, maybe there will be 20 by the end of this year. And that's coordinated by Pronatura. They have been doing a very nice job on that. We recently put one in San Quintin. Terra Peninsular was in charge of that. But you know what is missing about that network is to more tags for birds. So that's the next step. I think that we need to start tagging birds in order for the Motus station to be useful.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we're just about out of time, and I want to thank Edwin, and also in particular Eduardo for an excellent presentation and your time today. And additionally, being willing to speak in English. We appreciate that. I know it's
English.
yeah, you do amazing. And we appreciate your efforts there too. I will follow up with folks that were on the call, and then a number of folks who emailed me that they would like the recording and any follow-up information. So we'll get that out there. And Eduardo, thank you again. Great to see you. Take
Okay.
care.
Thank you, Deb. Very nice
Yes.
talking
Luego.
with you. Bye-bye. Bye, Edwin.
Ciao. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a good day.